Welcome everyone to Tales from the 90s. This is the podcast where we go back in time to my favorite time period, the 90s.
Tales from the 90s never die. In our hearts they testify. VCRs and mixtape spins, where every tale begins. Tales from the crypt, marathons, wrestling wars and morning yawns. Play kickball in the street, man those days can't be beat. Tales from the 90s never die.
Now, literally right before I hit the record button, I just seen an email I got from YouTube talking about something new called YouTube Communities or something. I think it said it's only available on the mobile app, and it's where you can like start discussions and share things with people. So if any of you are interested in that, I'll look into that and I gotta turn the feature on and see what all is on there. Maybe we can come up with you can help me create the next bonus episode for July, even, because I'm still trying to figure that out. Speaking of that, just yesterday I recorded the Mothers and Fathers, my bonus episode number 9, that's coming out sometime this month. I'm not exactly sure when. As I'm recording this is the day before this podcast drops, so from Thursday on, sometime this month it'll be on there. It's just a matter of uploading it. I already got it ready. But it's just me talking about my mom and dad, some great memories. I didn't even mean to split it exactly in half, but it timed out almost perfectly, like almost 30 minutes on my mom and almost 30 minutes on my dad. It's weird how it, like... Anyway, just if you want to see that community thing, like, I don't even know what all you can do in it. And I just seen the email. You could talk about things and share things on there. It's like going beyond what you can do in, like, comments. So if anybody's interested in joining that, I'll let you know how to do it, or once I figure out how to do it. But anyway, I got my Mountain Dew Summer Freeze here. It's supposed to be like a bomb pop, cherry, lemon, and raspberry. The bomb pop flavor. Pretty good. It usually comes out every year. I'm waiting to try the dragon fruit they got at Walmart. And if you guys are thirsty, you should try refreshing Mountain Dew. I'm joking. I'm not sponsored by Mountain Dew. I ain't sponsored by anybody. If anybody out there wants to sponsor me, go ahead. I'm like one of them kids you see on the commercials from you always see in the 90s. Sponsor a child for a penny a day. It seems so cheap. It was like $1 a day or something. It's like, it seems cheap until you got to realize that you don't send them $1 every day. You always see those as kids. Anyway, none of that has anything to do with this podcast, I don't think. We're as I said, this is Tales from the 90s. We go back to the 90s. I pick a random year and a random month from that year. And just so happens that last week's episode was number 33. We were in, I believe it was February of 1992. We're actually jumping ahead 9 months now to November of 1992. So if you were to have gotten pregnant in February of 1992, that would have been the last podcast. This is the podcast you have your baby. I don't know. Anyway, this is my 7th trip through 1992. Because like I said, I randomly choose where I'm going. I put a number in, like, this randomizer website I go to. And, that's how I end up choosing. Because I don't want to go, like, in a row. It'd be too boring. I'd be talking about some of the same things, like, over and over. But anyway, at this time period, I was 8 years old, getting ready to turn 9 the next month. My wife actually turned 11 in this month, because her birthday's in November. But like I said, before we get into that, check out the bonus episode. And like I said, if you want to help shape, I don't know yet what July's episode's going to be. Typically, my bonus episode, sometimes I'll do a top 50 list, or maybe it'll be less if I don't have enough for that. Because, like, before I've done, like, the horror movie, my top 50 Nickelodeon shows, top 50 Saturday morning cartoons, or I'll talk about a specific topic, or just, I've done 9 of these now, so I try to make, and these don't always just stick to the 90s. In fact, a lot of them go outside of the 90s too. That's why they're bonus episodes and not like a main one. Anyway, all that out of the way, to check out all my other videos on here. I'm always putting all kinds of stuff on here. I want to get back to what we're talking about, 1992 and November. I'm start off talking about video games. During the early 90s, I can find records of the best-selling video games of the month. As it went on, they stopped. I guess they stopped keeping track of that because it was like harder to do. But at this time, the best-selling video game for NES, the original Nintendo, which was at this time Super Nintendo had been out, so they weren't getting like the latest games, but they were always getting all kinds of sports games. And it seems like always the best-selling NES games during this time were all sports games. This month, no different. It was Tecmo Super Bowl, which is, of course, the Tecmo version of football. Just your basic, original Nintendo sports games. Nothing fancy there, but a lot of people have a lot of good memories with these. It's always funny, though, when I hear people say, like, oh, those are the good old days. I'd rather play Tecmo Super Bowl than the latest Madden. Really? Would you really? You're really comparing that? Now, I admit that my favorite video football game of all time is NFL 2K5 on Xbox. I'm normally not an Xbox over PlayStation type guy. I normally pick PlayStation over Xbox. But that game was the best on there. They had more features, for one. And also, the biggest one is you could use your music. Because you could, that was the greatest thing about the Xbox is you could actually save music to it because, it's a Windows product. It's just like a computer. You can save your music to it and have it play in your, what do they call it? I think it was called the crib. Your little area where you could play all they had paper football and I think they might have had an air hockey, but you can like buy pictures to put on your wall and change it. I love stuff like that. But anyway, when people say that like the Tecmo Super Bowl was better than Madden, they're just saying that they remember having more fun and more fond memories of it. You can't really seriously say that game is better in any way to Madden. Even if Madden has glitches and everybody says it's the same game, because it really has been pretty much the same thing year after year, just updated rosters. But let's be realistic here. Now, when we go into wrestling games, I will still argue some of the Nintendo 64 games were better than the current video games. Now, I won't say like No Mercy is my favorite, it might be one of my favorite games of all time, that and WCW NWO Revenge, but the SmackDown Here Comes the Pain and the first SmackDown versus Raw were probably tied for my top 2 favorite wrestling games of all time. But yeah, so some of the later games of the 2K games, I would go back and play No Mercy over them, And the great thing about it is they have mods. If you have emulators, and they even put some on cartridge, but I have an emulator for Nintendo 64, and you can actually get mods where people have actually made the No Mercy and those games for that time period and actually putting current roster wrestlers in it, which is pretty cool. I don't have any of those yet, but that would be really fun to play. Love someday for them to just make an old style game that played just like No Mercy for PlayStation. I think that it would sell more than the 2K games, really, because it would get all the older fans if you could play in that style again. Anyway, I'm talking about like 1999 right now, and 2001 I think was No Mercy when it came. Anyway, I'm talking about that. This has got me all over the place today, as you can tell. We don't always follow a format. I got a little format I look over here at, but my thoughts take me everywhere. If I spend all this time talking about this, we're gonna be on here 7 hours. So let's move on. The number 1 selling game for November 1992 for Super Nintendo was Street Fighter 2. Of course, Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat were always in battle of which was the better fighter. Of course, both were arcade games first, and then the consoles. And of course, famously, the first Mortal Kombat was on both Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo, but the version for Sega Genesis sold way better because they had the fatalities and the blood. So in Mortal Kombat 2, they actually they put a warning on it, but they actually put the actual version on Super Nintendo. Just looking over at the red score. But anyway, yeah, Street Fighter 2. If I had a preference, I would pick Mortal Kombat, obviously. But you can't go wrong with Street Fighter, especially Street Fighter 2, one of the best-selling games of all time. Sega Genesis, speaking of Madden, the number 1 selling game was John Madden Football 93. You notice two things there. One, it was John Madden. They used his full name because now later they just shorten it to Madden. Everybody knows who he is, and it's sad that people know Madden more as the name of the game. A lot of people, like teenagers that would play it today, might not even realize that he was an actual football coach and then a commentator. Like that they just happened to name the game after that. I mean, they could have named it after anybody, but he'll definitely live on through that. But the other thing you'll notice, besides that being called John Madden, it's not called Madden NFL. It's called John Madden Football 93. This is before they got the actual NFL rights to use in the game. I believe they did in Tecmo Super Bowl, where I don't think they could have used the Super Bowl name. But anyway, they were, a bunch of fictitious teams that they made up. I believe they had a Cincinnati one, but I can't remember. And, they couldn't make it look too much like the NFL teams. But of course, later on, Madden would acquire that the NFL license, and then sadly, after 2K5 came. By the way, when I say that 2K5 for Xbox, NFL 2K5, that was back when the last year NFL allowed more than one game to have their license. After that, well, then when they allowed, it's just after that, the year after that, EA, which owns Madden, signed an exclusive deal with NFL, and they've had it ever since, to where no other games could have NFL on it. Even the Blitz had to call themselves something. I think it was called Blitz the League when they came out with another Blitz game, which those are fun. The Blitz games. I've never played Blitz the League, but those older NFL Blitz games, super fun. But anyway, another point besides it being a superior game, which by the way, Madden 2005, the same, this game that came out the same year as 2K5, was a great game too. It was almost flawless too. So it wasn't like it was a bad game. It's just 2K5 was just that much better, especially with all the features. But that game came out for $50. 2K5 came out $20. I mean, which one you gonna choose? The Twins just got a home run. Crap. But which game you gonna choose? So I think that's why EA got panicked and did that. But yeah, at this time, there was no 2K because, as you see, Sega Genesis was getting their games from them. The 2K games actually started on Sega Dreamcast. I had the very first NFL 2K game for Sega Dreamcast. It was great. I loved that game. Back before I had a memory card, a VMU for it, I had to keep the game on all the time if I wanted to save any progress, which is not good on your system. I'm glad I got a VMU. But the top-selling game for Game Boy was Super Mario Land 2, which I've never played. I've played Super Mario World, but I've never played Super Mario Land 2 for Game Boy. And then another thing in video game world, which I know I'm spending a ton of time, I'm sorry, just going off the wall here. A game that was released this month, which was a huge game, was for Sega Genesis, was Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Of course, that's a monumental game. Of course, the first one, classic, introducing the character. Introduced his friend Tails, which gave another character and another way to another set of things, where Sonic went fast, Tails, he could use his tail to fly through the air. And also Sonic got the supersonic power, which has become a staple later on, especially my favorite game of all time, Sonic Adventure for Sega Dreamcast. At the very end, you get to be supersonic and take on the final boss in that one. But yeah, Sonic 2. And of course, I think the third one is where Knuckles was introduced. I think, I could be wrong. But yeah, it's hard to believe there was a time when it was just Sonic. But yeah, now with the huge universe of Sonic characters they've came out with. But yeah, those original. And the thing is I got like motion sickness, so it's hard for me to play those games. Like for some reason with those games, the side to side with the fast motion, it gives me a headache really bad. So I haven't really got to play those games as much as I've wanted to, but won't deny the impact. And there's been millions of people had so much fun with those games. We're going to move on to sports. Speaking of the NFL, they were in their, not in the middle of their season, they're getting towards the end of the season, of course, November. When I give the standings on here, I always give it at the end of the month. Because that way it's through the month instead of right before the month. So anyway, they just finished week 14 when November ended. The leaders for the AFC are the Steelers, Bills, Chiefs, and Chargers. The NFC leaders were the Cowboys, 49ers, and Vikings. And my team, the Bengals, we were last place in the I put NFC Central. AFC Central. We're 4-9. We'd end up finishing 5-11, so we'd only win one more game, finish last. Super Bowl that year, of course, that wasn't until January, but Cowboys beat the Bills in Super Bowl 27. Of course, the Cowboys and the 49ers faced off in the NFC Championship, and everybody remembers the 90's for being Cowboys and 49ers. Like, they were the big main teams. And, of course, the Bills famously or infamously lost 4 Super Bowls. I think this was their 3rd year in a row. They lost 4 Super Bowls in a row. You know, they had a good team. They just couldn't get the job done, it seemed like. But NASCAR, Davey Allison won the Pie Royal 500 at Phoenix, and Bill Elliott won the Hooters 500 at Atlanta Motor Speedway. And, of course, November is the final month for NASCAR. And Alan Kulwicki ended up winning his one and only NASCAR championship that year because, you know, it's based on points. It's not like now they have playoff system and stuff. But back then it was just based on points. So, you know, you could get last place in the final race and still, you know, celebrate a championship, which is kind of weird. I think that's why they came out with a playoff. Speaking of coming up with a playoff, college football would later do that. At this time, they were not doing things the right way, really. You know, first of all, a championship being decided, you know, the national champion decided on a poll of, you know, who, and sometimes there was a tie. Like, literally, they would end in a tie of the, you know, co-national champion, or they would just pick one of them that had the same record. It was just stupid. They do it so much better now. But speaking of that, you know, the game, of course, every November in college football is Ohio State, Michigan. This year, the game ended a 13-13 tie. Stupid. I love the college football overtime rules, and if they're the same as when I started watching college football in like the early 2000s is when I started watching it. But what they do is each team would get, like I said, if it's the same now, I haven't seen because I only watch Ohio State games anyway, really. I don't have time to watch other teams, and it's the only team I like. Unlike with football, I watch all the teams. NFL, there's so many college teams, and like I said, Saturdays I'm always busy going to wrestling and everything. But what they would do for overtime is each team would get a chance at the ball on their opponent's 25-yard line. So you only got to go 25 yards, and you get 4 downs, I believe it. Or I can't remember if it's 4 downs or if you can get a first down if you get 10 yards. I can't remember. Anyway, it would go like that, and it would go back and forth. Sometimes there'd be several overtimes if there ends up a tie or nobody scores, and it would just continue until, you know, both teams had the ball and had a chance. Or I think if a team went ahead and then the other team got the ball and it was like intercepted. But I wish they would do that in the NFL. No game should ever end in a tie. That just sucks. You know, when you can do something like that, you know. I hate any time, especially NFL, when games end in a tie. You know, do something like this. You know, it makes it more exciting for one, and two, you get an actual winner. Ties are just stupid. You don't compete to be the same as another team. You compete to win. It's kind of counteractive to what, you know. If you end up tied, why even have the game at all? Go home and go to bed. But it was during this time. Sorry, I blah, blah, blah so much that I need a drink. During this time in my life, that we were getting ready to move to Norwood. We were living in Mount Carmel, and if you watch my bonus episode, or some of my past episodes of this, you know that Mount Carmel is a town we lived in. It's in Claremont County, which is the county next to Hamilton County, which is where Cincinnati's at. Getting ready to move to Norwood, which was pretty much a suburb of Cincinnati. My mom had met the great and powerful Marky Foe, as I've talked about on here before, the stepdad from hell that no matter how bad the times were, I always look back with like laughing at something. But this is the time we met him. I've told the story before, but it's just so funny that like my mom was like, I guess met him at a bar or something, and she was like talking about him for weeks. She's like, he looks like Hulk Hogan, and we met him the one day, and we were like, because, you know, we're little, and he was like legitimately like 6'6", so we like looked up. But you know, at first everything was good. You know, even before we moved to Norwood, we didn't have any problems with him at all. Of course, after pretty much the honeymoon was over, that's when all the problems started. But it was during this time that we were moving from there, which, I've told before the story about my bus driver hated me so much that they knew I was leaving, and they threw a party on the day that I was, the day after I was supposed to have left. Literally threw a party, like I'll tell you in a minute how I knew there was an actual party. Besides that, they told us. Anyway, they thought I'd left because I wasn't there. But what would happen is I got like super sick, like diarrhea so bad I had to go to the hospital. So sick. And I remember like being in my red turtle pajamas, like they were red, but it was like I think Donatello or Leonardo. But I remember being in those and going to the hospital. I was so sick. I don't know why. I must have got food poisoning or something. Or something, because nobody else got sick. But anyway, I wasn't there at school Friday. I actually went Monday because we were behind in the moving. So that was my last day. I get on the bus, and the bus driver just like, you just see the look in her eyes, like, oh no. And by the way, her name was Mrs. Dickerson. So you can guess how I tormented this poor woman. I would say rest in peace to Mrs. Dickerson, but I have a feeling she's somehow still alive, because even though she looked like she was 60 then, she's somehow going to outlast me and pee on my grave or something. I just know it. But anyway, like she said, we had a party and some of the kids, yeah, and I thought it was just some like joke, but I literally seen like confetti like on the ground in some parts. So they literally had a party because they thought I was gone. But anyway, yeah, we ended up moving, and of course the girl I had my first crush on lived there, but she didn't seem like real interested in me, and I was too shy to even, because I was in 3rd grade anyway, so it's like, what am I going to do, propose to her? So I was too shy to say anything, which is funny. And when I went to the fort, because this was like I said, November, so I ended up starting school either November or December, I can't remember which. So it might have been this month, or it might have been after this month when it happened, when we went to Norwood. Anyway, the next year in 4th grade, I had a best friend there. Her name was Renee. I remember her name, but like I like had a huge crush on her, and we were like best friends. And I finally told her I had a crush, and it was like a light switch flipped. Like she just wanted nothing to do with me ever again. After, wouldn't even be my friend, would never talk to me again. Like, I don't know. It was like, was me wanting to be your boyfriend like that horrible of a thing? You can't talk to me anymore? It probably was. But anyway, if for some random reason you happen to be watching this, why do you gotta stop being friends? She probably knew, because I was so annoying that I'd probably ask like 9,000 times probably why. But anyway, that was my life at this time. I was getting ready to turn 9, getting ready to move to Norwood. I don't believe I'd ever lived in Norwood before. Actually, I think I had. I have vague memories of maybe living there in an apartment at some point when I was younger. If I'm wrong on that, anybody that would know, I guess it'd be my mom. Let me know. But I think I have vague memories of living in for a brief time in Norwood. I know my sisters grew up there at some point, but that was before I was even born. But anyway, Norwood made up a lot of my teenage life, and I get into talking about that later on. And I think I've lived most of my life now actually in Indiana, but born and raised in Cincinnati, and most of my childhood days in Norwood. But anyway, something I definitely loved as a kid and still do, because obviously I'm involved in it, is wrestling. And it's the month of November, so you know what pay-per-views that month. But before we get to that, a couple other events to go over. WWF Saturday night's main event was November 14th from Terre Haute, Indiana. And this was actually the final Saturday. It was the second one on Fox after they moved to NBC, but the final one until it was brought back in 2006. So it was the last one for a long time. Shawn Michaels defeated WWF Intercontinental Champion, the British Bulldog, for the title. And the main event saw WWF Champion Bret Hart retain his title, defeating Papa Shango, or Shango, however you want to pronounce it, by submission. And then WCW had their Clash of Champions, which was like their Saturday night's main event, a primetime TV special that wasn't a pay-per-view, but was still a bigger deal than their big show at the time was WCW Saturday Night. This was before Nitro, and I wasn't going to say before Raw, but no. Actually, yeah, it was before Raw, duh. This is 92. Raw didn't start till 93. But anyway, this was before that. So Clash of Champions was a big deal. Anyway, this is Clash of Champions number 21 from Macon, Georgia on November 18th. Shane Douglas and Ricky Steamboat defeated WCW and NWA World Tag Team Champions Barry Windham and Dusty Rhodes to win the titles. And then, of course, November, always the big Survivor Series pay-per-view for WWF. It's known as one of their big four. This is from Richfield, Ohio, November 25th, the 6th Survivor Series. And it's the first one that only featured one traditional Survivor Series match. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, Survivor Series, you probably don't know anything about wrestling. Survivor Series match it's basically 4-on-4 or sometimes 5-on-5. But they later become known as 4-on-4, a team of 4 versus a team of 4. And it's elimination, it's like a tag team match, 1-on-1 at a time. And someone gets eliminated, that team's down a person, and it can go as bad as a 4-on, or it can get down to 1 versus 1 at the end. But anyway, that's how it goes. In that match, the Natural Disasters and the Nasty Boys defeated Money Inc. and Beverly Brothers. And then also on the show, Randy Savage and Mr. Perfect defeated Ric Flair, my favorite wrestler of all time, and Razor Ramon by DQ. The Undertaker defeated Kamala in a casket match. And the main event was WWF champion Bret Hart defeating Shawn Michaels by submission. And then one other thing I noted in wrestling that month, of course, I talked last week episode was February of 92, and I had said that ECW had just started, which was known as Eastern Championship Wrestling then, long before they became Extreme. But it was during this time that Paul Heyman was booking. He had started in September. And the Sandman defeated ECW heavyweight champion Don Morocco to win the title. Now, this is a very different Sandman, if you know wrestling, than you're used to. If you've never seen very, very early ECW, you would like, what the heck? Because I know everybody thinks that pretty much that he got his name because of the Metallica song Enter Sandman, which he came out to. And it may be why, but the original character it sounds like a cheesy early 90s WWF, but they didn't come up with it. He was literally the Sand Man. Like, he wasn't made of sand, but he came out with a surfboard and wearing a surfing suit with like the bleach blonde hair, almost like Sting's, because Surfer Sting back then. But yeah, that was literally why he was called the Sandman originally, because he played in the sand with the surfboard. But that was that version of the Sandman. Of course, he would later go on to be the guy drinking beer through the crowd, and the cane, and the crazy off the wall stuff. He wasn't the best wrestler, but he wrestled a little better than he did later on. Once he realized he didn't have to wrestle anymore and just brawled, it probably worked better for his character. But yeah, he won his first ECW heavyweight title at that time. A little bit of news to note. Not a whole lot, but it was obviously a big thing. It was November of 92. My baseball game just stopped playing for some reason. Anyway, Bill Clinton was elected the 42nd U.S. president, and he defeated, of course, the incumbent president, George H.W. Bush. And Clinton would serve, of course, 2 terms, and then George Bush's son would take over after that. But everybody knows all the stuff with Bill Clinton, and I've talked a little bit about that on here, the interns. I did not have sex with that woman. But it was definitely a prosperous time during that time. So, I won't say too many bad things about Bill Clinton other than his questionable moral character, obviously. But I don't want to get into that because we'll get the Democrats are this, Republicans are this, blah, blah, blah. I don't ever try to get into politics. I remember liking Bill Clinton. I told the story before. Once he got inaugurated. His inauguration was in 1993, so I was in 3rd grade still at when I moved into Norwood, and I pretended I was Bill Clinton, and during my inauguration. There was actually kids involved in this too, so it wasn't just me being idiotic. It was one of the things you had to be there. It was like all over the news, like the presidential election. Back when people didn't like have extreme hate towards it seems like, and I'm not just talking about the president now, I'm talking about the president before. It seems like people have just had extreme hatred for the president But back then, even the people that didn't like him, I don't remember hearing like, oh, he's the worst human being in the world. It's just, you know, especially to kids, you don't hear all that stuff. You hear what you hear on the news, like this person's elected president, and you know, you're just like, oh, that's pretty cool. You know, you think it's the coolest job in the world. It's in reality, it's probably a job that, of course, everybody seems to want, but it don't seem to have many rewards as far as like, by the time you're done, half the country hates you, half the country loves you. Don't seem to be any in between. Even JFK, I've seen people, oh, he did this, blah, blah, blah. You know, even one of the most beloved presidents in history, people have said stuff about, you know. I don't think we'll ever have a president that's, like, universally loved and only a few people that didn't like it, you know. I don't think it'll ever happen. But anyway, that's my politics stuff. I don't really, you know. My view on politics is, number one, I'm not a president worshiper, no matter who the president is. I don't automatically be like, well, he's my president, so anything he says, I'm just going to be okay with and happy and go along with it. You know, there's every president there's been for the last, 20 or something years, ever since I could started thinking about the world. You know, because, as a kid, you don't really think about the world in the way you do as an adult. But every president there's been things that they've done that I've agreed with, that I've disagreed with. So, you know, don't think there'll ever be a president that does every single thing I agree with. Hopefully there's never a president that does every single thing I disagree with, because that would be horrible. But anyway, we're going to move on to music. My favorite music is, of course, country music. But I always give the Billboard's Hot 100 countdown, their number ones. End of the Road was reaching the end of the road here. Boyz II Men, that huge song. This is their last week at number one. There's 13 weeks in a row that song was at number one. That was huge. And then we've got How Do You Talk to an Angel, which I briefly remember hearing, How Do You Talk to an Angel part of it, but I don't remember anything else about the song. It was done by The Heights, which I've never even heard of that band before. They were number one for 2 weeks. And then the final week of November started the monster run of the Whitney Houston song, I Will Always Love You, which of course was originally written and done by Dolly Parton, but Whitney Houston did it for the Bodyguard. What is the Bodyguard? The Bodyguard movie. And of course that thing was huge. It ended up going number one, from the end of the year into next year. It spent 14 weeks there. And the thing about it was released that month, and it shot up to number one that quick. But that, definitely a career song, one of those top songs of all time. American Country Countdown, which is what I was listening to every Sunday morning with Bob Kingsley from 9 o'clock till noon, usually taping it on my cassette tape. Number one for 2 weeks. Plus, it was number one for 2 weeks back in October, so it made 4 weeks total. Was No One Else on Earth by Wynonna Judd. That was her debut song after her mom Naomi had retired. She got hepatitis, so the Judds couldn't perform, couldn't continue together, but Wynonna started her singles career, and that was her first song, and that song was huge. I thought she was going to end up way bigger than what she was, but doesn't seem like women artists, some of them seem to fizzle out in the 90s quicker than the men did, obviously. But she still had a good 2 or 3 year run where she was number one after number one. It all started with No One Else on Earth. And then I'm in a Hurry and Don't Know Why, Alabama, finished off the month with 2 weeks at number one. One of their last really big songs. Love that song. Got to see him perform it live in Louisville 2 or 3 years ago. But a little bit of sad news. On November 23rd, Roy Acuff, which was a pioneer in country, popular with the Grand Ole Opry. He was part of the Acuff Rose music publishing group that was actually signed Hank Williams, but he passed away from heart failure on November 23rd, so some sad news there. Let me get another drink here. I'm all mush mouth today. This isn't as easy as you think. Just talking blah, blah, blah. What are we at now? 33 minutes or something. It's going along a lot quicker than I thought. I thought it was I'd be an hour and a half in. I spent an hour talking about football games. But One of my most popular segments on here is when I do the lineups. This week I'm doing a Saturday morning cartoon and Nickelodeon lineup. These are all from November 7th, which is my wife's birthday. She would have been turning 11 as these shows were on. And I give the full lineups. Again, obviously it's Saturday morning cartoon, so it's Saturday morning lineup. Thanks to the fandom website, which slows my computer down like crazy, but actually has complete lineups and sometimes with the names of the episodes in them even. But we're going to start off with ABC. Starting at 8, they had The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, which I never really watched. I never was really into Winnie the Pooh. Then we have Land of the Lost, the 1991 series, which I absolutely love. Then we've got Wild West Cow, Boys of Moo Mesa. Never seen that. Darkwing Duck, which I know is a popular one, but I never really watched that. Then we got Goof Troop, which I've watched that a few times. Definitely just a great cartoon. And then we got 10:30, we've got the Addams Family cartoon, which I love. Then we've got an hour of the Bugs Bunny and Tweety show. Running theme on here is how many different versions of Merry Melodies and Looney Tunes can we have? There's one, the Bugs Bunny and Tweety show. Then at noon we've got a pup named Scooby-Doo, which is of course Scooby-Doo as a puppy and Shaggy was younger. And then at 12:30 we got ABC Weekend Special. The episode was Stanley and the Dinosaurs. I don't remember that. It was like 12:30. I was out to play by then, usually. Then over on CBS, we got Fievel's American Tales, which I remember a little bit about that. Then, of course, this was before ABC and Disney were merged, so some of the Disney stuff was on CBS. We got The Little Mermaid, which, of course, I didn't watch because I wasn't... I've seen the movie, but, it was more of a girl's thing than a boy's thing during my days. Then, we've got, for an hour, we got Garfield and Friends. They had their season finale. There was like 2 episodes in there. They had their season finale there. And then we've got an hour of the Turtles. Of course, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, that classic, came out in 1987 series. And we got Back to the Future, which I never watched that. I believe it was a cartoon, but I've never watched that or the movies. Shoot me now. Raw Tunage, which I've never seen, but I think it's kind of like cartoon shorts all put together, kind of like in a Kablam, one of those type of ways. Then we got the Amazing Live Sea Monkeys. I seen a preview for this when I was watching some old cartoons on YouTube. They have like full blocks from different, whatever time periods you can pick, and even with the original commercials. But I've never seen a commercial for the Amazing Live Sea Monkeys. And I was like, this thing looks horrible, but it looks hilarious at the same time. And then at 12:30, something called Grimmy. Don't know what Grimmy is. And then we move over to Fox, which I believe this was their first year of Fox Kids, I believe. If not, it was the year before. We got Dog City, which I don't know anything about. And Bobby's World, the original Fox Kids cartoon. Love that. Then we got Tom and Jerry Kids. Of course, just like with Scooby-Doo being a puppy, that Tom and Jerry were younger then. And we got Tasmania, another Looney Tunes character, but his own. Speaking of that, the Plucky Duck Show, which of course Plucky Duck was from Tiny Toon Adventures, which itself is derivative of Looney Tunes. So we've got 3. Eek the Cat, which I know was a popular one, but I never got into it. And Super Dave, Daredevil for Hire. I remember watching a little bit. It was based on that Super Dave character. And then X-Men the series. I've said it time and time again. I don't like superhero movies. Can't stand them really. Not just don't like them. Can't stand them. But I loved X-Men the animated series. And of course, Batman the animated series is I believe my second favorite Saturday morning kids TV show or cartoon of all time. Number 1 was Turtles, but Batman the animated series, that thing had such an effect on me. But X-Men was high on the list too. And then of course my least favorite channel, NBC, because they had all the teen stuff, and I wasn't a teen then. We have Saved by the Bell, which I love. Everybody loved that. California Dreams, kind of like it was like a teenage version of like a soap opera. Didn't really care for that. Saved by the Bell again. Name Your Adventure, which I never watched, and an NBA Inside Stuff, which I never watched because I wasn't into basketball. The only time I ever watched basketball is college basketball during March Madness, and only the teams I like. But that is Saturday morning cartoons. Now we're going to move over to Nickelodeon, which is information from the same site, and it gives from a midnight till 11:30 of every day. But I decided to pick the same day as that just to show you what was on. And of course, everybody knows Nick at Night was on from, basically from nighttime till 6 a.m. the next day. But, it starts at midnight, so Nick at Night started the day. We got Mr. Ed, love that, the talking horse. The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis, I never watched. Same with the Patty Duke Show, the Donna Reed Show, America Tonight, Mary Tyler Moore Show, Dick Van Dyke Show. I know a lot of these are classics, but I've just never watched them. Get Smart was at 3:30, Dragnet at 4. I watched a few episodes of those. Of course, they're kind of like a precursor to the Naked Gun movies and the Police Squad series with Leslie Nielsen. I love those. 4:30, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, right up my alley, just like the Twilight Zone. And then we got Mr. Ed again, Many Loves of Dobie Gillis again. And then at 6, we got to start with Nickelodeon. And we had Kids Court, which I've never watched, but I want to find an episode because I'm pretty sure it's just like the People's Court. But I always wonder, what are the kids, what are they taking the kids to school? Oh, he stole my pencil. Oh yeah, well he stole my piece of paper. All right, I know what we're gonna do. We're not gonna send you to the principal's office. We're gonna send you to Kids Court to settle this. I said I don't know what they actually on there for. I don't know if it's just a joke TV show or if it's real problems. I'm gonna have to watch that and give a review. But at 6:30 we got the Little Bits I've never seen, and of course some of this is Nick Jr. stuff, which is the preschool stuff. Because during this time of year, of course Saturday kids are off school, so more Nickelodeon than Nick Jr. But during the weekday, during school year, they had Nick Jr. until 2 p.m. Till kids started getting off school. But anyway, Eureka's Castle, love that one. That's considered a Nick Jr. show, but I love Eureka's Castle. R.L. Stine was actually one of the creators on the show, believe it or not, from Goosebumps. And at 7:30, the classic show Lassie. Can't say enough good stuff about that. Then we've got 2 of the original Nicktoons that at 8 and 8:30. We've got Doug and we've got Rugrats. What more can you say about those and their impact on building up Nickelodeon? Then we got an hour of Muppet Babies. I know, you're getting tired of me doing that, but I'm always going to sing it. The great Jim Henson Muppet Babies. Didn't really care for the Muppet Show or any of the Muppet movies, but I love Muppet Babies. Then we got my favorite orange cat, Heathcliff. Garfield's, of course, my second. Heathcliff's always my favorite orange cat. And all those alley cat friends of his. Nickelodeon's Most Wanted, Yogi Bear. I don't know what made it Nickelodeon's Most Wanted, but it was just Nickelodeon putting their name on Yogi Bear for some reason. Then we got an hour of You Can't Do That on Television, that classic Canadian series that gave Nickelodeon, that's where Slime came from. Is one of the very first shows on Nickelodeon once they went from the network that was called Pinwheel to Nickelodeon. Then we got an hour of the Dennis the Menace cartoon, which I loved. That's a cartoon from the 80s. And we've got 1 o'clock, we've got Flipper, which is, of course, just Lassie with the dolphin. But it's a little different. Then we've got Beyond Belief, which is not Beyond Belief Factor Fiction, which I love from the late 90s. The show where you got to guess which one is fact or fiction. This is, I don't remember exactly what this is, but it's a completely different show. It's made for kids. Then we've got a movie from 2 to 4, Lassie the Miracle from 1970. So it was like a feature-length movie. I don't know if it was originally shown as a series of 4 shows, or if it was an actual movie, or if it was in theaters. But sometimes Nickelodeon on Saturdays and Sundays would show movies, and they're showing Lassie the Miracle. Then at 4 we've got Nick News, which of course I didn't really tune into as a kid. I didn't care about the news. But 4:30, Get the Picture. Great game show hosted by my mama. It wasn't hosted by my mama. Mike O'Malley, if I can speak, which I can't. He also hosted Guts, which we'll get to in a little bit. Welcome Freshmen, never watched that really. But Salute Your Shorts, love that, about the teenagers at camp. And every time I think about you, it makes me want to fart. Who if they said fart on a kid's show, and that was one of Carlin's original 7 words you can't say on television. Shows you that a lot of things are changing in the 90s. But then we've got Family Double Dare, my all-time favorite game show on Nickelodeon and of all time. It made number 2 on my top 50 Nickelodeon list. Number 1 was, by the way, Are You Afraid of the Dark? But Nickelodeon Guts, like I said before, this was before Global Guts. They just had 3 American kids. Later on, they would have kids from all around the world compete. Both of them were good, but I think Nickelodeon Guts, obviously it was the original, but the Global Guts, they ended up getting, the bigger mountain to climb, and they had more of a budget then. But Nickelodeon Guts was still pretty fun to watch. It was our version of American Gladiators before they had a kids version of that. And then at 7 o'clock we got Doug again, Rugrats. But of course, Saturday night is Snick, and I believe this was the first year of Snick. If not, it was the year before. But 8 o'clock, this is a classic Snick lineup here too. We've got 8 o'clock, Clarissa Explains It All. Love that one. Melissa Joan Hart, obviously. She's more well known for Sabrina later on, but I always knew her first and foremost as Clarissa. Then at 8:30 we got Roundhouse, which was like a cartoon compilation show. Then at 9 we've got one of the 3 original Nicktoons, Ren and Stimpy. This time they realized that Ren and Stimpy should only be on at nighttime. Kids shouldn't be watching at 11 o'clock in the morning. But I love that. And then 9:30, my all-time favorite show on Nickelodeon, Are You Afraid of the Dark? It was a new one. It was called The Tale of the Prom Queen. I don't specifically remember that, but I'm sure if I watched it, it would come back to me. And then at 10 o'clock, they'd turn it back over to Nick at Night with Alfred Hitchcock Presents, which was actually really smart to put that there, because obviously kids sometimes would watch, Nick at Night when just like, 10 o'clock, we must go to sleep. Some people had to. But, if that followed Are You Afraid of the Dark, I'm sure kids are like, oh, this is creepy, this is cool. A lot of them, including me, is probably, if I remember correctly, that's where I got my love for Alfred Hitchcock Presents, which, of course, led me later to The Twilight Zone, and then, of course, I was already watching Tales from the Crypt by then, so... I haven't talked about Tales from the Crypt a lot in the last a lot of episodes, because I normally only talk about it if it's during a time period where the episode came out, either that, or Tales from the Crypt Keeper, the cartoon, or Secrets of the Crypt Keeper's Haunted House, the game show, which was only lasted the season, or one of the 2 Tales from the Crypt movies that came out in the 90s, which hasn't happened yet. I only talk about it during the month because, there's only so much you can talk about something once, so I'd rather not talk about it. And actually, I got it behind my sign here, I can't get to it, but I just got the 3rd EC Comics Archive book of Tales from the Crypt. It's got 6 full Tales from the Crypt comic books from the 50s. It's really cool. This is the 3rd one. They actually made 5 of them, so I'm pretty excited. I'm more than halfway there of having the full collection. Hopefully someday I'll have the full collection of all the EC archives. That would be so cool. But anyway, back to the lineup. We got The Lucy Show, which my mom loved. It was either The Lucy Show, I Love Lucy, or The Lucy and Desi Comedy Hour. All 3 of those had Lucille Ball in it as pretty much Lucy. I don't remember if she was the same exact character or different characters in each one. I didn't really... I watched it, but not like paid attention to storyline. It was just, it was on. But let me know if she played the same character in all of them. I know she was named Lucy in all of them. But anyway, we got the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and then they end the night with Dragnet. So that is our Nickelodeon lineup. And I got one more little kind of lineup to go with here is the TGIF lineup, which, huge as a kid and a teenager. The big show on TGIF at the time was Family Matters, of course. They were in season 4. They followed that up with, made by the same creator, Step by Step. They were in their 2nd season. Then the 3rd show was Dinosaurs. They were in their 3rd season. Of course, that was the famous Not the Mama, Baby Sinclair, and the Sinclair family. And there was so much comedy in that was directed towards the parents that went over our heads. But there was still enough in there for kids to be entertained too. It was really the perfect series they could have had on that got the whole family to watch. Because TGIF wasn't just, obviously it wasn't just kids shows where they'd just show cartoons. Family Matters, Step by Step, families can watch that. And then the final show was Camp Wilder, which I don't remember anything about at all. It was on its one and only season. It was canceled due to low ratings. I think it even got canceled early. But kind of a newish segment here is talking about kids' meal toys, more known as the Happy Meal toys. But Happy Meal, of course, is McDonald's. But it's where I look up some of the kids' meals toys from this time period, the month. And sometimes they would come out and end right before another month did, so you get 2 toys in the same month. So if they came out in November, I'm going to talk about them. But the McDonald's Happy Meal had the Tiny Toon Adventure Cars. I actually remember having one of these, a purple one with Babs Bunny in it. Babs, not Bad Bunny, the rapper guy, whatever he is. But I actually had one of these. They were pretty cool. They were like they're kind of like little mini cars, and they'd have like different things that they would do. But another set of toys that came out was the Tonka trucks and Cabbage Patch toys, which of course I was one of those ones where the boys would get the Tonka trucks and the girls would get Cabbage Patch toys, unless the girls wanted the boys' toys and the boys wanted the girls' toys or whatever. But they had something for both, so they didn't. So that way it wasn't like, because not every girl wants to play with a Tonka truck, not every boy wants to play with the Cabbage Patch toys, so they're trying to appease both, which is pretty really cool thing. Especially if you're a collector, you can end up collecting both. But anyway, the Tonka trucks were kind of like 5 trucks, like, a little dump truck. They're big versions of the Tonka trucks, just like the miniature versions, dump truck, fire truck, that type of thing. And the Cabbage Patch dolls, of course, weren't full-size Cabbage Patch dolls. They were like mini Cabbage Patch dolls, which would be really cool to have if you had full-size Cabbage Patch dolls. It'd be like they're little kids or something. Themselves are kids. But Wendy's had a kids meal then. I don't know if they still do that now or not. I don't think so. But they had one called Too Cool for School Toys. And they were a set of 6 different toys, or they were more like school supplies, basically. They had like a hamburger notepad, the little notepad, the little Frosty, that it was an eraser. Fry's Hot Numbers book. I don't know what that is. I just wrote it down. Fry's Hot Numbers book. Green pickle pins. It was shaped like a pickle, but it was a pin that worked. A plastic pencil case, and then they had foods, like little stencils of food that you could draw. So, just little stuff you can use at school. You can actually find a full set of these on eBay for $27.50. That's pretty cool. And the other one they had that month was Dino Games, which were just like 6 dinosaur-themed games. Not the TV show dinosaurs, just dinosaurs in general, which were really popular then. Of course, this was the year before Jurassic Park came out, and of course the dinosaur shows. So dinosaurs were really becoming like a popular thing with kids. I think they always kind of been. Just something been fascinating about dinosaurs, the little kids. And adults too, but they had like Dino Catch game, Dino Obstacle Course game, Dino Maze game, Dino Basketball game, Dino Card game, and a Dino Puzzle. And some of these were like the little things where you gotta move the ball through the maze or get it to go in a basket. Just like little kids' toys you always get at the Happy Meals. They were cheap, inexpensive things, but as kids you just loved them until they got broke or lost. But the final one is Burger King. They had Aladdin toys. And Aladdin, I'll talk about that in a couple minutes here, because it came out this month. But the different toys, which I remember vividly, Aladdin on a magic carpet. They had Jasmine riding on Raja, the tiger. They had the genie's lamp, and they had the Abu the monkey. His arms would move. I think he did a little winding thing, and he'd go like this. And then Jafar and Iago. And they also had some color-changing cups too, which you could get with. I think you had to pay a little extra for the cups, but just some cool stuff there. Always fun to remember those things. We didn't get to eat out a whole lot, so when we did, and we got a kids' meal, it was a really big deal. But talk a little bit about TV. A couple episodes that were kind of controversial. Seinfeld episode The Contest airs on November 18th. Ends up winning an Emmy next year. And that was a contest between the 4 main characters, Jerry, George, Elaine, and Kramer. Of a contest, they would... who would... I don't know how to put this best without getting some kind of community guidelines ban or something, but this is a contest to see who would go the longest without touching themselves. In the famous scene where I can't remember what Kramer's, he like sees a woman or something, and he just comes in and slams the money down. I'm out. But definitely a controversial thing at the time. When you think about these days, that's nothing. But at the time it was pretty controversial. But it was like one of the most popular Seinfeld episodes of all time. Right there with the Soup Nazi episode. And another one that was November 21st, that was a controversial one, was an episode of Captain Planet and the Planeteers, which was a TBS show. It was started by Ted Turner and Jane Fonda specifically because, they were definitely into they're environmentalists and into saving the earth. But the controversial topic they took on in this episode was about the AIDS epidemic, which is kind of unheard of thinking, especially, it's not the only way it's transmitted, but everybody knows the main way, or the way that everybody thinks that it's transmitted. But it was controversial for a cartoon to take on that issue. But that's exactly what Captain Planet was doing. They were taking on those, believe it or not, and I think still today, environmental issues are still a little controversial. I still don't know whether to believe global warming is as I believe in it. I'm not saying I don't believe in it. I'm not saying the Earth is flat either, but I don't think it's to the point that some people say it is, as bad. I believe it does happen, but I don't believe it's at the point that some people. Anyway, I'm sure I'll get some comments for that one. But Captain Planet and the Planeteers definitely didn't shy away from those topics, and that was by far their most controversial one. I don't remember specifically that episode, so I don't have any memories of what even they talked about. But a sad thing in TV, Nick Arcade ended its 2-year run. They only had 2 seasons of that. I don't know why. I don't know if the budget required more, or they had to pay for licensing for that had used actual games on there, like Sega Genesis games and a couple other systems. And plus the green, putting the games together and everything. It probably got to be too much work, because I can't imagine it got canceled for ratings. Everybody loved Nick Arcade from my time. But a couple more topics to talk about. Books. Released this month was Delores Claiborne, which is a big Stephen King book. And the movie was huge. I believe it even won a couple awards. Of course, the story is, it's about a woman who's abused by her husband, which is definitely a theme in the Stephen King books. But she ends up not being able to take it anymore, and ends up, during the eclipse, during that time, got him to chase her out, and she had this trap set up to where he would fall into this, because she discovered that there was I don't know if it was a well, I think, or a hole. I think it was a well that they didn't know about. She discovered it one day by accident. She ended up trapping him in it, and eventually died in there. And the town sheriff believed that she was guilty of it, but they never convicted her. But anyway, that happened as and she had a little girl, and the reason she actually all the abuse was bad enough, but she found out that he was I don't want to say, but you can imagine something he was doing with his daughter. So that was what caused her to finally snap and kill him, basically. But the sheriff could never prove it, so she went, but she had that stigma to her. But anyway, her job was taking care of this older woman that was rich, and taking care of her house, and later became her caregiver, and she ended up throwing herself down the steps to end her life. And they walked in, the mailman walked in and thought that she'd killed her. Delores had killed this woman. I forgot to mention Delores Claiborne was the woman's name. But so the same sheriff was trying to get her for that and couldn't convict her again. But there's the strained relationship with the mother and daughter, because the daughter never knew that she'd killed her father, but just that all the talk of it, and just they had a strained relationship because, of course, what had happened to the daughter, of course, affected her. But she'd blocked it out for the longest time, and then finally had to admit what happened later on. And but it's a really good book, and the movie stars Kathy Bates, which, of course, she's more famous for another Stephen King story, Misery. Which, by the way, if you've seen the Stephen King series Castle Rock, the second season, you don't even have to watch the first season, because it's not. There's a little few connections, but you don't have to watch it. Anyway, the second season is all about that character from Misery, Annie Wilkes. Kathy Bates played to, I believe she won an Oscar for that. If she didn't, she was nominated, but I believe she won it. But anyway, it's all about her life story, like from up until that time. So it's really cool to see that in the second Castle Rock series or season. But anyway, Delores Claiborne. I seen the movie before I read the book, but I've read the book since, and it's really good. Of course, there's always recommend reading the Stephen King books. They're always going to be stuff in them the stuff is a little bit different, but also a lot more information than they can put into a movie, and it's a really good one. And then another book that came out that month, which is, of course, a huge book to me, was the fourth Goosebumps book, Say Cheese and Die. And, of course, a very famous episode of that, too, on the Fox series. It's about the camera. Love that book and episode. I read the book way before I'd seen the episode. Like I said, it was the fourth Goosebumps book. You know, those first few Goosebump books were like, I'm not saying after a while they got watered down. They didn't really. But those first ones were just absolute classics and masterpieces. One more thing to talk about is movies. There was a couple big movies that came out during this month that I watched. One, and I never seen them in theaters or anything. I've seen them since, but one was, I'd talked about before, Aladdin. That was a huge Disney movie. And of course, I've seen the second one, Return of Jafar, and the TV series too. But Aladdin, the classic story about the boy who finds the lamp, and then Robin Williams playing the genie in that is perfection right there. Gilbert Gottfried is the voice of Iago. The annoying bird, made him more annoying by Gilbert Gottfried's voice. But of course, he's trying to win Jasmine, one of the Disney princesses, and just great movie. Like I said, you could get the cups at Burger King and the toys. But I love Aladdin. Got it on DVD. Same with the next movie, Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. Of course, the first Home Alone is always going to be my favorite of those. But Home Alone 2 is really good too. I watched one. It was the latest Home Alone where... No, actually, I'm wrong. I watched two. I watched the latest Home Alone where I think the guy that played Buzz was like a cop in this. Of course, later on, he ended up being arrested for I can't remember what he got arrested for recently, but it was something bad. But anyway, and I've seen I think the third one, or whatever, the one with the stupid remote control car and camera and stuff. Anyway, the only Home Alones worth watching are 1 and 2. But, the second one famously has Donald Trump in it at the Trump Plaza Hotel, and it's basically like he actually finally gets on the plane, but he gets on the wrong plane because they get separated. He ends up going to New York while his family's in Florida. And then somehow the wet bandits are in New York. They escape from prison, somehow are in New York and find him, and Kevin's got to shut him down again. Macaulay Culkin definitely got his fame from the Home Alone movies, and love those movies. Like I said, I got that on DVD too. But thanks for joining us. This has been a fun one to talk about. Sorry, I've been a little bit all over the place, but I did the random to pick the next episode, and would you believe it, we're actually staying in 1992 for a third week straight. For episode number 35, we're going to September. So we're going, last week was February. We skipped ahead 9 months. Now we're going back 2 months to September of 1992. This will be my 8th trip through 1992, so we're getting close. Once I've done a full complete year worth of episodes, January to December, I will do one final one on the year as a whole, as far as like I'll do awards for music and movies, because I don't really watch the Oscars, but maybe I'll talk about some of my favorite movies from the year, some of the best TV shows. Not try to be repetitive and talk about some of the things I've already talked about too much, as far as pick my best of this. They have the top video games of the year lists. They have wrestling awards, and I can give brief synopsis of the champions in a company, the main champions, just stuff like that. That'll be the 13th episode of each year, whenever I get to it. But I'm going through 92 pretty quickly. Next week's going to be number 8, but I was 8 at this time, as I was here just 2 months later. But we had just met Marky Foe, which I kind of just talked about that now, so I'll figure out some other personal thing to talk about. Maybe I'll talk about some memories of some restaurants, or just some memories of 3rd grade, or just whatever I happen to think of. I've talked a lot of my personal memories on these before. We're almost gotten all my memories out on this, so I have to dig into my brain to see what I come up with next. But let me know, like I said, let me know if you want to look into that YouTube community thing I just found out about. I don't even know if you people know about it. It's probably only advertised to people with channels. But anyway, if you want to help me figure out what the bonus episode for July can be. I don't know how I'd do I know July is famous, the holiday is 4th of July. I don't know top patriotic songs. I don't really sound like an episode. Oh, speaking of that, I've got one series I haven't even started filming yet, is called Tales from the Albums. That's where I take these big albums that were like huge in an artist's career and huge in my life, just hearing them, and just give my thoughts on the album and all the songs on it. The first one I'm going to do is Randy Travis's The Storms of Life, his very first album. So let me know if you have an album, if I like it. If it's not country, I'm probably not going to do it. I may branch out into other things, but for the most part, it's going to be country. But it could be, this one's from '86, so it's not in the '90s. But that's coming in the future. We got a lot of videos that are always on here. Thanks for joining us, and I will see you guys next time.